Welcome back. Well, as we heard, the President outlined his goals for the year and indeed his final term, and it will be crucial not only for the US, but as we also heard, for the rest of the world, us here as well. Here to discuss the key points is Associate Professor Brendon O'Connor from the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. Welcome back to the show.
Good to talk to you again.
Now, what did you make? You, like me, have watched a lot of State of the Union speeches. This was quite important. It's a new year, but it's a new term for him, and this is his legacy term. What your overall impression before we go to the specifics?
Well, it was a laundry list. It was a lot of policy ideas. It was less aspirational. His first three State of the Union addresses, he was really saying America's in hard times, but we're a great nation. We're an exceptional nation. We're going to bounce back. So there was a lot of a pep talk rally sort of aspect to his first three. This was more about, these are the things I want to do in the next 4 years. Here are some real policies. Republicans, vote against these things if you disagree, but don't force them off the table in the Congress. Don't stall me on these issues, particularly gun reform. He made this very impassioned plea to say, look, let's bring on a vote. If you want to vote against it, put your name on the record. Just don't play this cat and mouse game where you can keep it in committees and you can frustrate it in different sort of ways in the Congress.
Yeah, I thought he was trying to sound more statesman-like now, rather than the new young Turk who's the great orator. This was the presidential statesman, wasn't it?
I think so. I think he's moved very much from that mode of enjoying campaigning, which he didn't really seem to enjoy in 2012. There was a sense of, I've done that before, I'm over it. So I think there's a sense now that he enjoys being president, he enjoys policy making. He's just got to work out how he can achieve policies, which he didn't really achieve in the first term. Apart from the healthcare reform, a lot of his efforts were frustrated.
It was interesting, the focus on gun control, because from our point of view, from business on Wall Street, when I was there at Christmas, Wall Street seemed quite happy with Obama back, because they thought if he does gun control and things like that, he'll leave financial reform alone, just get on with it and they're fine. So that doesn't affect them, a few gun stops. But it did seem like guns would be the sort of the signature area, or he was focusing on that today, wasn't it?
Yeah, gun reform, I think he'll put a lot of energy into that in the next few months. Immigration reform, I mean, particularly...
Again, another one they don't worry too much about on Wall Street.
Yeah, well, it's a financial benefit to the United States to probably let illegal immigrants have amnesty. Now, they're not going to do that. There's going to be some pathway to citizenship, but that means you've got more taxpayers. You've got people living, sort of 11 million people living in the United States illegally, some of them not paying taxes. Get them on the books. A lot of them have got jobs.
And, of course, recognition of this was the fact that the Republican reply was done by Marco Rubio, their token Hispanic, who did it in Spanish as well as English for the first time.
And I think the Republicans realise they can't talk too tough on immigration reform. They don't want to lose a generation of Hispanics. They've got to make...
Like they have so far.
The tide of demography is moving against them. And I think they realise that next time round it will be a younger person, and a Hispanic, someone like Rubio will have to be on the ticket.
I think he's a number two. You've got to hear Governor Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo, I reckon he's my tip. Bit to the left, but he's done a fabulous job there and seems to have won over both sides. That's by the by.
Yeah, Hillary at 300 years old, maybe.
Look, it's a long way out. And last time she was the front runner. I mean, so long as the big dog doesn't get involved, she might be right. But, I think her health wasn't looking good. Let's get to the nitty-gritty, the economy, because that was the, obviously, it was the centrepiece, as we heard, jobs. But the issue, the battleground, still deficit reduction, but he had a spring in his step. He got over the fiscal cliff, even though it's coming back. We've got the sequester. The Republicans are a bit wounded, but the battleground is still taxes versus spending. He seemed to have a proposal, though.
There is a little bit of wind in Obama's sails at the moment. He's got to feel good about getting re-elected, of course, and he's had a few victories over the Republicans in the last couple of months. But the Republicans know how to fight these battles to a stalemate, and that's the general outcome. They either delay or they throw mud at each other.
We shouldn't get too euphoric that we've
not at all.
He's had those little incremental wins.
I mean, his great hope is that he can divide the Republicans, that he can force the sort of John Boehner types, the moderates, to agree with him and cause a massive sort of backlash on the Tea Party side, and the Republican Party is fractured in some way. I think more likely the Republicans will hold as a bloc, as the majority bloc, and this will just be another stalemate throughout this year for most of the time.
Well, they can't leave it as stalemate. Well, I suppose they can, but they've got they only kicked the can down the road on the fiscal cliff for 3 months. We've got the sequester issue. There is the deficit issue is coming up again in May. So it seemed to me he had a firm proposal, though, today. $900 billion in spending cuts, $600 million in tax revenue, as in the Republicans, as you say, did their usual knee-jerk, oh, he's obsessed with raising taxes. But he did give more in spending cuts. It did look like a compromise. Now, was this just his usual smoke and mirrors?
Well, there's a lot of bad blood, I mean, on the negotiating table. I mean, Boehner and Obama have famously never really got on very well. I think the Republicans are probably most likely at the moment to say, let's just bring in the automatic cuts. Let's just, we're serious about deficit reduction. Obama isn't.
See, now,
it's a high-risk strategy, but I think they'll do it.
I thought those automatic cuts, also known as the sequester, were the thing that the Republicans didn't want because it slashes defence spending so heavily.
I think they'll take that. They'll take that for their cuts, the cuts to entitlement programs. They'll say, well, Obama's going to cut defence spending anyway if he gets his way. So why don't we take a few of his issues or a few of the Democrats' traditional policy areas and bring cuts to unemployment insurance, maybe some other programs.
Well, if you're right, and that'd be, I'm for it. I actually agree. That was the point of the sequester. But, of course, the upside is you really do start to cut bone. You get in there into that deficit. But the theory is that the economists claim it will be so shocking and the defence cuts so great and the layoffs so great, it could actually affect what we're talking about, this wonderful, the green shoots of recovery, the economic recovery.
Could put America into recession.
No,
and so
I was trying to avoid that. I was saying it's threatening recovery.
I think, I think that's where the brinkmanship has got to. And that will
so it's the old Republicans will pull the suicide vest, will send us into
well, in 2000,
recession.
In 1995, there was this budget shutdown, and the Republican Party forced it through Newt Gingrich as Speaker. And Clinton really came out of that period looking pretty good.
Yeah, Newt did blow himself up.
And so there could be, Obama could be hoping for a repeat of that. The Republicans, I think, have backed themselves into this corner of debt as a great moral evil to some extent. So I can't see how they can get out of this without Obama looking very good, as though he's won the argument before the March 1 deadline.
But your comments, as I say, right at the moment we're in a nice sweet spot. It looked good, we're over the cliff, but you're right. We all know they just kicked the can and the big issues are still there. But it is disturbing that whatever way they go, it could, that recovery is so fragile, isn't it? And despite his big talk today, there was nothing specific, was there? Really, he's been saying that for ages. Jobs just don't come.
Yes, that's a great shame of it all. 4 years, there's unemployment still nearly 8% in the United States. I think the point you're making is that from an economist's point of view, this politicking is craziness. But I think these guys are politicians first, and they're economists maybe
first and last. First and last.
So this economic advice is, well, am I going to win my next term? Where's the position of the party? So I think.
But you see, this is where Wall Street is hoping that they'll be diverted like children with the glittering toy. Gun control, immigration.
Yeah.
But I don't think so, because deficit, as you say, is the heart and soul of them, isn't it?
And I think Main Street is really where most of these Republicans see their base now. There's very few of them who think, well, OK, we owe our position in Congress to Wall Street. So maybe a small group of them. But you think about the global financial crisis, the financial crisis of 2008. It was really Democrats who came to Bush's support and said, OK, we've got an adult problem, we've got to deal with it. The Republicans were saying, well, let the big banks fail. Let's see how the chips go there.
I think there are comparisons here when you have, if the coalition gets in, they're going to have, there's no surplus. We are going to have a deficit. Their attitude is it's all about spending. We'll get rid of any new taxes, but we'll still, give the goodies. It's a dilemma. It's a pity. I was hoping we'd see if the Republican model does work.
Well, I think Obama's big argument, and he was putting a bit of it onto the table today, is there's probably a need for a bit more of a stimulus. I mean, that's an argument very hard to make, but I think that's where he is on balance. Where the Republicans are basically, you know, if we cut the deficit, in some ways this is going to benefit the economy.
Okay, we didn't get into it, but he also said climate change. But again, his usual lovely Obama rhetoric.
I think he can do more. He can do more because he's saying he's going to use executive powers to monitor emissions. And that can actually have a bit of force. So it's risky. It will cause a lot of a backlash, but I think there might be a bit of movement on that.
Well, at least he had a vision thing, which is more than our politicians have. I like the State of the Union. Brendon O'Connor, thanks for talking to us. Nice to talk to you again. We will talk during the year, even though it's not an election year. That was Associate Professor Brendon O'Connor from the US Study Centre at the University of Sydney. That's all for tonight, but I'll be back tomorrow night for our last show of the week. That means our Thursday night panel with plenty to debate, as usual. Always firing, always fun. See you then.